So it's a new day. It's been a couple days since I finished gluing up all these bulkheads in the transom, and the hull is pretty stiff at this point. Shaking it here from the transom. Fore and aft, it basically doesn't move at all. It's still got some wiggle left and right. Pretty sturdy feeling at this point. Everything looks good. I'm very happy with how all the bulkheads and frames and all of that turned out. Installation was without major problem, other than a minor self-induced one here or there. Mostly my confusion over frame 6 up here. And all I really had to do was turn this around so that this cross piece would have been on this side. I don't know why I had it in my head that it had to go the way that it did. But for whatever reason, at that moment in time, that's what I thought. And my fix was fine, but I didn't have to do that. I just had to turn it around. Didn't hurt anything. I just could have made it a little easier on myself. But it looks good. I like it. Taking a few minutes here, getting started this morning, just thinking about what is going to happen next. And obviously, again, it's the bottom. So I think I'm going to move this stack of lumber. This is getting to be in the way. It's handy as a work surface. Not a work surface, but a storage surface. But I'd really rather have the floor space. I mean, this mahogany, actually, I think I'm going to use for the shear line, that rub rail trim, and the cockpit combing, and the deck whale. In other words, the piece of lumber underneath the edge of the deck on the exterior of the hull. There'll be accent pieces made out of this sapele, and I've hesitated on that. Normally I would want the bright finish trim, and that's what I'm going to do with this. But because of where I want to use the boat in the Chesapeake Bay area, I don't want a lot of varnish on it. But I don't mind a little bit. I can keep up with a little varnish. So we're going to do that because it'll be nice for the appearance of the boat. And I already bought the wood, so they're big, heavy pieces. When I got it delivered, I just put it here because I didn't have room in the wood shop, and I really don't even now, but I've got to get it moved. I attach these little legs to the corners of the transom, to the double pine frame on the inside of the transom. And these are holding up the stern of the boat now and also keeping it level side to side. So this has stiffened things up quite a bit, not having the stern be so floppy. And that'll help me when I need to take these centerline braces off to do the bottom plywood. So these are just scrap pine boards screwed into the back side of the frame with some drywall screws. These are temporary. The holes will get filled later with epoxy. But it just holds everything nice and securely and lets me work on this boat while I get the bottom done. The design of this boat uses external chine logs. That's this piece right here. It's a double piece of 1.5 inch by 3/4 timber for 1.5 inch total. Got an angle cut on the bottom at 6 degrees to match the angle of the hull. And ever since I started this project, and even before, I've gone back and forth on whether I wanted to build it with this external chine log or do something else. Now, this is a very simple and very strong approach because you epoxy and screw this to the hull, and it gives the bottom a nice big flat surface to which it can be epoxied and screwed and fiberglassed over the exterior. I'm going to sheathe the whole exterior of the hull, but that's a topic for another time. This is what the boat's designed to be. And I don't love that look, so I've considered alternatives. The main alternative for me being stitch and glue. But in the end, I 99% decided that I'm just going to build it the way it's designed, which you can't go wrong with that. Initially, I thought I might like to do something more elegant, and I keep kicking myself back to reality and saying, you don't have to do that. It's not better the other way, it's just different. So I think I can live with that chine log. It's a whole lot easier and quicker to do. Honestly, one major factor contributing to my decision to just stick with the design, other than that's what I should do because it's what the design is. The other major contributing factor is it is no fun to crawl around inside this boat. If I were to stitch and glue, I would have to be in and out of here quite a bit. Drilling holes, feeding wires, all the stuff you do for stitch and glue. Filleting from the inside because that's what holds a stitch and glue together till you can do the tabbing. I crawled around in here more than enough finishing up some of these bulkheads the other day. And honestly, until a couple days ago, I had virtually convinced myself to stitch and glue the bottom. And then I spent half a day crawling around to get all these bulkheads and frames installed. And I just don't want to do that. So sometimes practicality wins out. So I'm going to build it the way it's designed. And there's no shame in that whatsoever. So that means pretty much the first order of business is to scarf up some pieces of lumber from which to make this. I've debated whether I laminate the two layers together and then bend the whole piece in, but I'm a little wary of that. The laminated structure would be too strong and stiff. I don't think I'll be able to bend it. So I'm going to laminate it in place out of 2 pieces, which will also make the whole getup simpler to install. So I have to make 4 pieces long enough to do this whole boat, which is going to be something like 24 feet. And I have 12 footers for this purpose, so I'll have to cut 1.5-inch pieces, 8 of them, and then scarf 2 together to make 1 length on each side, and another 2 together to make the second length. These are destined to be the inner lamination of the chine logs. These have a 6-degree angle on one side and are otherwise square. It's 1.5 inches at the long dimension, and this first layer goes up against the hull, flush with the outer corner of the plywood, all the way along the length from stem to stern. Over here are 6, well, there's 5 here and one other that I have stacked up with the first layer that I'll show you. This is the outer lamination of that chine log. And it's basically the same thing, but these are a little bit narrower because these sit on top of the angled cut of the first piece. So it's just a little bit narrower. This is an upper and a lower. This is the inner one that goes against the hull. And this is the outer section. And they just stack together like this. They're flush on both sides because of the way I've cut them. Gives me 1.5 inches of depth with the 2 layers of 3/4 and 1.5 inches across the widest part of the bottom. So this edge here goes against the hull, so the hull would go out like this. So the raw pieces for the chine logs. Next thing is to scarf the ends. So this is my scarf layout. It's an 8-to-1 angle. This is 3/4 stock, so these are 6 inches long. It's 8-to-1. And if I cut each end of this at this line, taking out the waist part, then these 2 pieces will scarf together like that. I lose 1 foot of length. This is 24 feet raw minus 1 foot, so I still end up with a 23-foot usable length with 1 scarf and these 2 12-footers. So the easiest way for me to cut these is to make a little jig for the table saw that'll hold the piece at the required angle, and then I can just clamp the piece in place and run it through the saw. So that's what I have to work out now, is to figure out how to cut all of these. So this is my test scarf. I did cut extra pieces so that if I break one, or for doing this scarf test, I can fine tune before I cut the bulk of the pieces. This came out pretty well. The world's simplest jig. Just a piece of plywood that I run against the fence with the piece clamped against this straight edge on the inside. And I just cut through and it cuts the angle. And it works for both ends. I might adjust it slightly because I think it cut on the wrong side of the first line. So I've got a little bit of a tiny void right here. This end, this razor end of the scarf on the outer piece should go just a little bit further up. And that's because I'm just a hair too far over on the first cut. So that's an easy adjustment to make, but otherwise this did the job just fine. So now I've got however many more, 10 more pieces to cut. So these 4 pieces are my chine log blanks. There's 2 pieces for the first section that goes along the hull and 2 pieces for the outer section. They're just slightly smaller. These are all scarfed and glued. These are approximately 23 feet long, 1 scarf in each piece. I had thought about staggering these when I installed them on the hull and decided there was no need for that here because these are going to be completely epoxied in place, which will hold the joints very tightly, and there's no reason why the scarves can't more or less line up. It's also going to be glassed over, so rather than go to the effort of trying to make one of these in 3 pieces with 2 scarves, I've decided not to, because I didn't see why it was necessary. If these were standalone pieces, that would be something I might do, but the way these are getting installed and how they're going to be glued and secured, there's just no way these scarves are ever going to fail once they're in place, and it doesn't matter that they're together. So that's the conclusion I came to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. This looks a little messy because I glued these up and slid them a little bit, so there's kind of a mess on the plastic, but I chose this table saw top, because it's dead flat, so that way with a little bit of weight I'm holding these so they're nice and edge is nice and flat. I was fortunate to have enough space in the wood shop to glue these up. They're quite long, but I had the space, and so that allowed me to glue them at a nice working height instead of on the floor, which is where I usually have to glue scarves. I did make a mistake on a couple of them, and I cut the scarf in the wrong direction because the top of these has a 6-degree angle, and I made a mistake and didn't do it right. So I had the short side lining up with the tall side. I'll lose another 6 inches on these, but that's okay because they'll still be long enough. I don't need a lot of extra at the stern. I'll leave the length at the bow to help me bend it in. So there you have it. Scarfed chine log blanks. 2 for each side. They will get laminated in place against the boat when that time comes. It's been a couple days since I glued up these scarves. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the clamps off and clean up the joints a little bit. They look a little rough right out of the gate, but these will clean up. Just a few minutes and some light sanding later, and here are the 4 scarf joints. So it's 2 pieces for each side, an outer and an inner, an I and an O. So now I've got to maneuver these out and into the shop and get them out of here because I can't walk anywhere right now with these things hanging out. It's starting to get a little annoying. So get them right out of here. So the first thing I'm going to do is sort these out so that I have the 2 correct ones on the correct side of the boat and facing the correct direction, so that because I'm probably going to have to end for end 1 so that the bevel on the bottom is facing the right direction. So this is one of the first layer rails, chine rails. I don't know if you can tell from looking down it, but the high point of the angle is on the right of the frame here, where my thumb is. So I'm going to have to spin this around end for end, because that high end has to go up against the edge of the hull there. And the same thing on the second lamination for the port side. So I'll spin these 2 around. On the starboard side, these are facing the correct direction. The high point is on this side where my thumb is. I want to check the level of this setup at the forward end. I've more or less leveled the aft end, and I'll fine-tune that before the bottom goes on. But here at the forward end I haven't done it yet, so I just temporarily removed my centerline brace, and I'm going to run a level across the boat. So with a little minor adjustment up here at the bow, got this more or less level. Again, I will check this again later. Just wanted to get it kind of where I think it should be before I put these chines on. So right now the boat is supported with a piece on each side of the bow here, and then those feet that I made at the aft end. The problem with video is it's really easy to forget to turn a camera on, or you thought you had it on and you didn't. I think I missed cutting off this stem. I cut it off flush from both sides and I've leveled across it. I knew that the starboard side here was a little bit higher, and it's probably just a cutting error between these two sides. Little minor, it wasn't much. But anyway, I've made that flush and a little bit down onto the stem itself. So this is now flush across here. Eventually I'll do that the whole way down. But this is enough for me to do the chine logs, and I'll do the rest another time. I've just got this first layer of the chine log clamped in place just loosely. I had to get a clamp started at the aft end, and then I've worked my way forward. It's not in its final position by any means, but I've got it from end to end. Now I'll go back and clamp it the rest of the way and get it positioned where it needs to go. I think I'll start forward and fine tune that and get that clamped exactly where it should go. And then I'll work my way aft to do the rest. This is the starboard inner chine log, all clamped in place along its length. I've aligned it with every bulkhead and frame, and more or less with the bottom. There's a few places. Remember, this is a cut line, so it's not necessarily completely perfect, at least according to how this is basically a batten. So this batten, assuming it's fair, is going to highlight any little minor. So a place like this, once I get this glued in, I'll plane this flush before the bottom goes in. And now I'm going to go ahead and sort of eyeball it the best I can from various angles and make sure that it looks like a fair curve, especially up forward where the curvature of the boat is much more substantial. And when that's done and I'm satisfied with the position, I'll mark it at the top edge where it rests on the hull, just for reference. And then I'll drive some screws, which will hold it during gluing, and then I can glue it. Attach this little scrap of plywood. This is just a place to put tools and screws and things while I'm working on this. So I'm going to put a screw at every station, which is 2 feet, and then one in the middle. So every foot I'll have a screw holding this in. At the 3rd or 4th screw in, I got a split here when I was driving it just without a pilot hole. So from that point on, I went and drilled pilot holes all the way along. And what I'm doing now is driving in the station screws all the way, but I'm just starting the mid-station screws. So when I glue this, I'm going to have every other screw that's just going into a brand new hole of its own making. So there won't be any problem holding. And if there is any problem, I can always clamp it. With all the screws driven that I'm going to drive for now, I'm going to go ahead and unclamp this aft half and get it glued up. Here the aft half is unscrewed and unclamped, just hanging out there. It gives me plenty of room to prepare this area, get the glue in, and get this thing screwed in place permanently. This is the inner lamination of the starboard chine log. Dry fit, dry clamped, evened it out with all the frames, etc., just as on the other side. I cut off the port side where it extended past the stem so that this one could run clear past it for installation. Fortunately, these seem to go on pretty nicely, just aligned at the top of the plywood the way they're supposed to be. So anytime you put something like this on, you've just got to make sure that it looks good to your eye. The first lamination of the chine logs is in place on each side of the boat. Did one side at a time. Initially, I had sort of wanted to do both laminations on one side and then move to the other, but I needed some clamps to supplement the screws, and it just made sense to do the first lamination on both sides. So we'll let this cure overnight, and next time I can do the second lamination. Basically the same thing as this, slightly smaller in size because of the angle on top here. That'll make this 1.5 inches square, more or less. It's a broad surface on which the bottom can rest and be secured to. So this went pretty well. I had no trouble bending this in. Pretty happy with how it looks. As you can see, I have a lot of clamps up here in the forward half of the boat on each side. That's just to help hold it in. The screws, there's not a ton to grab. Maybe they should have gone in from the inside. Might have grabbed better. I did do a few of those after the fact, especially on the stern on the starboard side. That's the side on the right here, and perhaps that would have been better. I screwed in from the outside thinking that the heads of the screws would help hold it better against the bend, but it was easy enough to supplement with clamps as needed, just to be sure that it holds well. In the end, it's the epoxy that's holding this chine log in place. The screws are really just clamps. I could have done it without screws. I thought about it. I thought it would be nice to streamline things if I could use screws, and that would get me the 2 laminations on one side all at once. That was my initial thinking. The plans do call for screws, but with this epoxy, you know, if you were willing to just clamp this all, that would be beyond adequate times 10. But I'm real happy with this. It's exciting to be moving on like this, getting these chine logs in. I'm looking forward to getting the second pair in, and this will be done, and I can do a little bit of minor shaping on them, and I can get going on the bottom, which is very exciting. And with that, over 2 days, the chine logs are installed. There's 2 laminations, one on the inside that I did on one day, and then the outer layer I did today. They're glued and screwed to the boat with epoxy. The epoxy is really what's holding them. The screws are mostly just clamping it in both cases, but I have supplemented the screws with clamps in the areas, especially where there's the most bend. It just helps pull the 2 boards tightly together so we don't over rely on the screws. I have more on this side because this was the second side I did, so I just left more clamps in place. I just put the bare minimum on the other side so that I'd have more clamps to do this side. Took a couple hours for the second layer. Cleaned up very carefully. Don't want to be sanding any epoxy lumps off of this surface underneath in particular, or anywhere for that matter that I don't have to. So they're long at the ends for later trimming. We'll let this all cure first before we do anything with that. These look good. They're, you know, they're in the plane with the flat bottom of the boat. That's what the 6-degree angle on these is for. Second lamination was just like the first. A little quicker, a little easier maybe. See, on the starboard side, here's where my scarves ended up. There's the inner one right there. The outer one is slightly staggered. It's just kind of how it happened. I didn't make a great effort to stagger them, because I decided earlier on that it wasn't going to matter the way these are glued in place. These things are never going to, you know, it doesn't matter if they're lined up. And on this side, the port side, they are basically in the same place right here. That's okay. In this application, I don't have any problem with that. Ordinarily, I would have avoided that, and I did think of it, but I didn't see any reason to do. I would have had to do like the outer piece with 2 scarves out of 3 pieces, but I decided it wasn't necessary, so I didn't build it that way. So we'll let this cure overnight, take the clamps off, and move on to the next steps.